How's it going, everyone? Welcome back to my channel. In this week's video, I want to make another unconventional doll hybrid. And I don't know if you can tell by the elf ears, but it's also going to be a fantasy themed repaint because my last doll hybrid was fantasy themed, and so I thought it'd be fun to make them able to exist in the same universe and maybe make them homies, buds, boyfriends? Question mark? Stay tuned to find out. Anyway, let's hop right into it. So for this project, I'm going to be using this Generation 1 Spectra head and this BTS boy's body. I do not know which BTS boy this is, do not ask me, but if you happen to know, you can leave that in the comments below. Actually, wait, no, let me guess first. This is Jimin? Jungkook? Those are the only two names I know. Whoever it is, I'm heating up his head with a hairdryer so I could yank it off of his shoulders. This is the first of many abuses that this poor man is going to be enduring today. For now, I'm just trimming down his crusty melted hair so I can set him aside and begin working on his new head. Because the Spectra was already disembodied, I can go right into cutting off her hair, which was a little bit sad because honestly it was still in really good shape and was like really soft and nice, but I had no use for it. So I'm scraping out the inside of her head with a screwdriver and removing all the hair plugs from the inside. I cut open a slit in the back of her head and use a pair of small pliers to get out all the gunk. Once her head is nice and empty, very similar to my own, I go ahead and use 100% acetone to remove her face. I know in my Terrifier video, I complained about removing the paint from these white-ass heads because they tend to stain, but it went fine this time. Once her head is all cleared out and cleaned off, I can get into the more exciting stuff. The surgery, if you will. So here I'm putting my knife back together, that's fun. Anyway, here I'm widening out her neck hole so that the new neck hole will be able to like slot in that space better when I place it. You'll see what I mean when I get there. But I learned a lot of valuable lessons when I made my first hybrid video that I was able to bring over into this and cut down on some of the trial and error. Once the neck hole is widened out, I cut another couple of slits down the back of her head so that it can have this sort of trifold, quattrofold thing, so it's easier for me to wrap it around his head like a horrific flesh mask. This still took a bit of finagling because even though the BTS head is smaller than the Monster High head, it still doesn't fit inside of it perfectly, so I have to cut some pieces off of his face. I don't know, it just flew out of my hand. Okay. I had to cut some pieces off of his face so that it could fit in there better without making it look too, like, weird and deformed. Flattening his face wasn't enough. I need to also take the crown of his head because it was like sticking out too much. So I just chopped that off, and oh man, it's been a long time since I've seen this footage, so I didn't realize how much of this poor man's head I mutilated. But once I felt confident I had cut enough off, I put his head back on his body so I could it could make it easier to put everything together. I'm sorry I'm laughing so much. I've been staring at this doll, like, mostly finished for months now, and so getting this reminder that there's, like, a horrific mutilated man underneath, like, that's just hiding in there, and I just forgot. Anyway, once everything is all adjusted, I use some super glue to attach his permanent face mask, his permanent facial transplant onto what remains of his poor skull. Once the chin is secured, I go around back and do a little bit of skull surgery on the Spectra head. I don't know what exactly went on here, but I eventually got everything back together and used a piece of felt to cover up like the big gap in the back. And with that, he's got a new head, baby. He's ready to go, ready for some paint. Similarly to my other hybrid doll, I went in with a lighter paint to match the head to the body, because once I add pastels, everything is going to darken up a bunch, so it's better to start with a lighter base. One thing that is nice about having to color change a head with acrylic paint is I'm able to go in with just a normal pencil to sketch out the features before I go in with paint, which was really helpful because this was a face up that was extremely challenging because, once again, I'm trying to masculinize a face that was not intended to be masculine, so some adjustments had to be made. Here I'm sketching out some sort of like abstract lines and stuff because I felt like a harder geometrical design would help also sell some of that masculine vibe, as well as be kind of like an arcane magical touch, because I want this guy to be like a sorcerer. Once I have everything sketched out to my liking, I'm able to go in with paint and start painting on his features. So, as I said before, my goal with this face up is to achieve two things. One, I want to make him look like a boy. He's a man. He got that buccal fat removal. He's got that male model vibe, you know? And the other thing I wanted to achieve was to have a sort of like otherworldly, sort of mystical feel, because I thought it was only appropriate if my last doll hybrid was a sort of warrior fighter type, that this guy should be like a mage, you know? We have to have a balanced party of abilities, you know? So while I'm fighting for my life to paint some straight lines, because that was another challenge I felt like giving myself, I guess. Oh boy, I didn't realize how much of that process I cut out. I ended up making the lines really thick, once again, to have a more, like a harsher feel, if that makes sense. Like, I feel like if you do things too thin, it could be kind of dainty and delicate and feel more feminine, but I went thicker to, once again, evoke that vibe. And over the top of these black lines, I went over it with some metallic silver paint because I wanted it to be like, I don't know, like magical. Feel like something magical is happening underneath his skin, because he's just like innately was born with some funky mystical stuff going on. For his eyes, I decided to go with this very dark blue iris, and I made them very large because I wanted to have almost like an alien kind of vibe. I just think that if you're a magical person, you should be a little bit of a freak, you know? And so I was just committing to that. And now I'm going in with the chalk pastel, and I use chalk pastel very, very heavily here, once again, to try to like carve out the features. And so I just went ham. I went ham, dude. And it's gonna get really messy here in a minute, and I just need you to stick with me on this journey and believe in me the way I had to believe in myself, okay? So when it starts looking whack, just hang in there with me, okay? Speaking of hanging in there with me, while I'm blushing his face, I'm going to take this moment to say that if you watched this far and you liked this video, consider liking it. It really helps me out a lot. And if you want to see more things from me, consider subscribing. I have a lot of fun things planned that I can't wait to show you. And if you have any thoughts, feelings, or onions, let me know in the comments below, but only if you're nice to me. Please be nice to me. I cry very easily. Also, while we're here, I'd love for you guys to help me figure out a name for this lad, because my first doll hybrid, I decided to name him Gabriel, because he was originally a Abby Abominable doll. So I figured if his name was Gabriel, his nickname could still be Abby as like a tribute to the doll he originally was. And so I was wondering if you guys had any ideas of what I could name this guy, because I don't have a convenient thing to use with Spectra. Spencer? I don't know. That's the only thing I could think of. And it's pretty bad. So if you guys have any better ideas, let me know. I'm adding a lot more of this brown chalk pastel around his eyes because I was trying to like sink them in more and make him look a little bit more like tired, I guess, tired and corpsey. You know those white boys that look kind of malnourished, I guess I guess that's the kind of vibe I'm going for here. And don't worry, I go in with an eraser and I clean this up a bit, but he's looking a little ooky spooky right now. But but that was the goal, kind of. I think at this point I was starting to get really scared for how things were going. So I went in and I redarkened his pupils and added more of these sort of like metallic arcane marks on his face. And I think it was partially just because I was trying to cover some stuff up. I was like, if you're looking at this, you won't look at the stuff that I'm not that happy with, So I think it works. I think it looks cool, but everything I do is to cover mistakes. Then I did these double catch lights I ended up hating, so I painted over those and then add a couple of more lines to his face. But after that, I think I still messed with it more off camera. But eventually, when I was in a place that I was satisfied with enough, I covered his face in many watered down layers of liquid sealant and called it a day. Once his face was complete, I was able to go in and start working on his outfit. So here I'm making some pants by tracing out a rough pant leg shape using his leg as a guide. And I'm folding that shape in half and pinning it in place to make it easier for me to cut it out. I'm not cutting it completely out. I left a portion connected to be the sort of like the crotch, like so it can end up being shaped like this. And once I have this shape, I just copy that over to another piece of fabric so that I could have two. And instead of trying to like trace it out, I just pinned it to the piece of fabric and used it as a guide to cut around. Once both pieces were cut out, I pinned them together and sewed them up. Once everything was sewed together, I spent a while fighting for my life, getting them turned right side out, but using a dowel rod, I was able to get the legs all unfurled. All put together, I ended up with something like this. They're far from perfect, but using a little bit of embellishment, we can hide more of our mistakes. Here I'm harvesting the ribbon from this little drawstring bag to use as like a little wrap around his thigh to just add a little bit of interest as well as cover up the little gap in the seam. I decided that I wanted to give him a mesh shirt, so before I did that, I wanted to give him some more of those arcane marks down his body. That way you can like see them under the mesh shirt and it would like look cool. So that they match the marks on his face, I'm going over these with metallic silver paint as well. To make his shirt, I'm using the same mesh drawstring bag that I stole the ribbon from, and I'm just kind of laying it out and cutting it roughly to size, and then I'm marking where his shoulders are and just cutting little holes to fit his arm through to make it like a little bit of a weird vest, I had to fight a little bit to get his arms to fit through the little holes I made, but luckily this material could kind of like stretch to fit the size that I needed, and I just did this like rough stitching in the back to hold it in place. And I'm covering up that ugly little seam thing with a piece of black fabric, and then I'm just adding more little strips of fabric to the rough edges and sewing them directly to the mesh to kind of like build this shirt on his body. Actually, to be more specific, the first back panel I sewed directly to the mesh, and then the shoulder pieces I sewed onto the back panel because that's a little bit sturdier. And doing it this way, you can see the stitches, but I feel like it fits for the like fantasy vibe. Next, I'm going to be making him a little jacket, a little coat, because I thought he just really needed it. This is probably one of the most complicated garments that I've ever made, and you could tell that I had a little bit of a hard time, but here I'm just kind of tracing out a rough template of like how the front panel and the sleeve would go together, and then I'm cutting those pieces out separately and then using those to trace what the actual pattern piece will be. Like as you can see with the sleeve, I add a little bit of extra space at the shoulder for seam allowance and just kind of made this shape. This is a lot of guesswork, you know? And then to make the back panel, I'm taking this piece that I sketched out and I'm mirroring it as well as extending it a little bit because I want to fit that piece of embroidery on the back and have it be part of the design. So I had to make sure that the back panel was wide enough to fit it. And then I placed that template directly on top of the embroidery to make sure it was lined up correctly, and then I traced it with some chalk so that I can cut it out later. Once it was cut out, I ended up with a piece like this. To make the front panels, I took the original template piece I made and placed it onto the back piece template and just traced it down to make sure that it was the correct length, and I just cut out two of those mirroring each other from the blank spaces of this embroidered fabric I used for the back panel. Once those were cut out, I ended up with a couple of pieces like this. I went ahead and decided to start assembling and sewing these bits together at the shoulder. For the sleeves, I decided to use this shiny material because I had this quote in my head where if you're making something that's not interesting in like color, you should make it interesting in texture. So I thought that having the sleeves be in a different textured fabric would be really cool. So I'm using the sleeve template that I made and I'm making 4 pieces that are mirroring each other. And once those are cut out, I go to assemble them and run into some unforeseen issues. Okay, so y'all, I thought my brain had finally freaking developed enough to figure out how to sew on a sleeve, but I freaked it up. I sewed it on the wrong way. So here's the tea. I truly cannot be bothered to either seam rip this or start over. Like if you were smarter than me, you would like test out a new thing on scrap fabric and do it that way, but I'm not smart. So I'm gonna stick with this being wrong and just make it also wrong on the other side and then do something to cover up this seam that I've goofed really bad. So I'm just gonna skip. I was gonna like, this was my test sleeve, bro. And I was like, okay, cool. I'm gonna like sew this one off camera and then like show you the steps of how I did it on the other side. But because I freaked it up just just don't listen to me. Okay? Don't listen to me. Google how to sew a sleeve. Because obviously I'm not the one who's gonna teach you. So, funny story. After I bungled that up, and I'm like, okay, I'm gonna sew the other sleeve on wrong on purpose, I sewed the other one on the right way. I'm so bad at sewing on sleeves that I can't even mess it up right. Whatever I'm trying to do, I'm gonna end up doing the opposite. So one sleeve is sewn on right, one sleeve is sewn on wrong, and we're gonna deal with that later. After I finished attaching the sleeves to the shoulders, I went ahead and finished up sewing the sides and flipped the sleeves right side out. After the main part of the coat was assembled, I took this velvet ribbon and attached it to the bottom hems of the coat and the sleeves. I just used hot glue for this because I didn't want any stitches to show on the ribbon itself. I used that same ribbon to cover up the messed up shoulder seams, and I attached that off camera and set the coat aside for a while to start working on his hair. I decided to use a dark blue yarn that I had already brushed out for another project some time ago, and I'm just using some hot glue to attach it to his head. And I've really been enjoying the hot glue method of applying hair. It's just been so much faster and easier. And because he's going to have a short hairstyle, every single time I attach a weft, I cut that chunk in half and then use the bottom half to like do the next section to help save on yarn. Whenever I do like big skull reconstructions like this, it always feels so nice to glue the hair on and like cover up their gross lumpy heads. It really starts all coming together for me. I just kind of went around in a spiral, gluing the hair to his head and kind of trimmed it as I went to give him this sort of spiky, edgy hairdo. It definitely looks the best from the front. From the sides, he has a little bit of bedhead, but it's okay. He's like unkempt. After I finished his hair, I went back to his coat and added these little metallic silver trim pieces to finish it off, and went ahead and added it to his outfit. Once he was wearing it, the sleeves were a little long, so I sort of bunched them up and used some black cord to kind of tie around the arms of his coat to help shorten his sleeves and also just add another little bit of detail. It was really difficult and I almost crashed out while I was doing it because I couldn't get it to sit right, so I did it off camera, but this is what we ended up with. For his final accessory, I'm making him a staff because you can't be a mage without some sort of spell casting implement. So I took a piece of jewelry wire and I wrapped it around this limp tint that I had to get this circle. And then I'm filling up that circle with hot glue to make the sort of like central point of the staff. For the main pole part of the staff, the handle, I don't know what it's called, bro. I'm using this dowel rod that I've used for a while to like hold shoes while I paint them. And now it's time for him to serve a greater purpose. So I'm cutting out this little notch at the edge of the dowel so that I could use some more jewelry wire to wrap around it and create these little, like, I don't know, these little bits, some little embellishment bits, so it is like a more interesting thing to look at. After I glue on the little, like, hot glue medallion thing that I made, I went ahead and used some jewelry pliers to twist the little ends of the wire so that they aren't like just like raw pokey bits sticking out to make it look a little bit better. And then I also used pliers to remove a little bit off the end of the dowel rod so it wouldn't be so long. And then I cut another notch into the dowel so that I could repeat the step that I did to add another little bit of wire embellishment at the head of the staff. And just like with the other wire embellishments that I did, I just kind of curved them around and used some jewelry pliers to curl the ends. To help secure things a little bit further, as well as cover up some of the naked dowel rod, I'm using some more of that black cord that I used on his sleeves, and I'm just wrapping that around the dowel rod, kind of weaving it through the wire embellishments so that it doesn't like get tangled, and I'm just gluing that in place. But wait, I'm not done wrapping stuff. I'm using this sort of silvery purple embroidery floss, and I'm just gluing the end and wrapping it down the entire length of the dowel rod to make it not just be ugly naked wood. After that, I'm using some more of that black cord to wrap a little bit further down the head of the staff, just because I felt like that would look better. I also use that same black cord to build up the sort of bottom butt of the staff. And then finally, I use some more of that cord to sort of create a center grip because I felt like it needed a little bit more black to tie into his outfit. And then I debated on if I wanted to paint the little hot glue medallion because on one hand I feel like it could use some dark blue to help tie into his color scheme, but on the other I feel like it looks kind of cool and mystical the way it is, so let me know what you guys think. I might change it later. But for now, he's complete, and here are the final results. I always say it. At the end of the day, with all the trials and tribulations, I think he came out really cool. And I don't know, what do you guys think? How do you think they look together? You know? Are they cute? Is it fun? I do want to create more dolls in this series, so maybe if they don't work out, I can add some more people into the mix and see what we think then. Anyways, that's it for this video. I hope to see y'all next time. Love you, bye!